to 755 is Real. I'm David O'Brien, Braves writer for The Athletic. And this is I think our final show without my co-host, Eric O'Flaherty, who's doing dad duties with his third baby. Good for you, Eric. Get back to work next week, man. But we are honored to have a special guest today. Very timely. Britt Ghiroli, who just came back from another fabulous vacation in Montana. Britt, welcome back, and and thanks for joining us here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave. You know what? All I do is watch baseball and climb mountains, and it's a pretty good life, I must say.
It's not bad, man. Yeah, I was envious because you know what I was most envious of? You guys were wearing not like just sweatshirts, but like jackets out there. I'm going, oh God, that must have been wonderful.
Yeah,
it's because it's not jacket weather right now in Atlanta.
No, it's fall out there, and you know, here in DC, the humidity is really bad too.
Oh my God,
it's nice.
We were in DC last week, and as hot as it is in Atlanta, DC was next level. It was 96 and humid, and the feels like was 105, and it was sunny. Yeah. I was drenched walking from the green line from the metro to the new entrance of the ballpark, which was confusing as hell anyway, but I won't get into that. What a disaster that is. You go in here, you go in here, we'll open this door for you. You go in here, there's no sign, so just keep up. You know where you're going? Jesus, man.
Well, when you said disaster, I wasn't sure if you're referring to the current Nationals or
that's a whole entrance. Yeah. I like that they've left all the murals up though of Max Scherzer and the three pitchers who were supposed to be they have that massive mural out in center field above center field of the three pitchers who were supposed to lead the team this year to the promised land.
Yeah, with Strasburg.
Max is gone, Strasburg's hurt, and the other is like 6 ERA.
Yeah, Patrick Corbin. Yes, absolutely.
Wow, they are a disaster. Yeah, I'll get to that in just a second. I wanted to ask you real quick, what can you update the people about? Because Britt, if you guys have not been keeping up in The Athletic, has been all over this Trevor Bauer situation and covering it and the courts and all that. What's going on with Trevor Bauer, and could you maybe straighten out for people who thought he quote unquote won the other day in court?
Yes. So what Trevor Bauer quote unquote won was a restraining order against one woman in San Diego who had basically requested a lifetime restraining order. The judge ruled that this was not a situation that required a lifetime restraining order against Trevor Bauer. Now, right. The criminal case against him with Pasadena Police Department is still ongoing. This woman and the woman that the Washington Post wrote about in Cincinnati also have the option of filing a civil suit. Right. And finally, Major League Baseball is still investigating. And the important thing here is Major League Baseball can do whatever they want. They are not beholden to the court system. And, it seems very unlikely that a criminal case is going to be pursued against Bauer just because of the threshold that needs to be met for something like that. This is a high profile case. I think it's a case that Pasadena PD has to be positive. We're going to win this case to take it on. But MLB can literally do whatever they want here. As I said, they can take into account the pattern of multiple women. They can look at perhaps other complaints, Bauer's history, things like that in punishing him. So I think, and I continue to believe, that MLB will probably have the strictest punishment here for Trevor Bauer. I would be surprised if we saw him at some point this season. This is just my opinion here speaking. It does remain active in the criminal system and also active among MLB. So yes, he won the ex parte restraining order hearing, but I think people are a little confused, thinking that maybe this means that none of these things were true or anything of the sort. And that's simply not the case. Bauer's defense was never that they weren't true. It was that in his mind, they were consensual. So some important things to kind of separate as we parse through what's still to come with this case.
Yeah, and it kind of leads me to, and I agree with you, I don't think we're going to see him this year, and I think his suspension will probably run well into next year. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they suspended him for a full year or season's worth of games or whatever. But that's what you said about the legal system and not having really any effect on what MLB does is relevant here in Atlanta, because we've also got this Marcell Ozuna matter hanging over the team. And I think like recently Marcell Ozuna had because initially it was a felony and a misdemeanor. He had a felony reduced. He's got 2 misdemeanor charges hanging over him still. I mean, the felony was reduced because I guess after looking at the police video camera, I don't think the prosecutor felt it was a definite winnable case just based on the video footage. So, but it didn't affect the misdemeanors that he still has against him, which are pretty serious. I mean, domestic violence, family violence carry pretty stiff penalties in Georgia, among many other states. But regardless, if you look at all the suspensions that MLB has handed down over domestic violence over the years, a lot of them weren't just, not only was there no conviction, in some cases, there were no charges even pressed. So like you said, MLB doesn't care, or I shouldn't say they don't care, but their suspensions are not affected by the legal system. They could, and they're waiting for the legal case to play out because they're investigating too. But they're not going to go if he gets if he wins, for instance, Ozuna wins and he's acquitted of his 2 misdemeanors. That doesn't mean MLB goes, okay, well then we can't suspend him. Not at all, right? I mean, they could still suspend him for 60 games, 100 games, whatever.
Right. In almost every case, actually, Dave, the MLB has decided to punish guys, even when there's no punishment in the legal system. And it's a much higher bar in the legal system, as I said. I think we all know in the legal system that there are loopholes, that money can certainly buy you a better defense, a way out of things, that these high profile cases, a lot of times, as I mentioned with Bauer, courts are hesitant to go through or to press charges or go to the fullest extent of the law because losing those cases is a black mark as well. So they sort of have to be a slam dunk, for lack of a better term. And with MLB, as you mentioned, like they have these stipulations in their domestic violence, harassment, and child abuse policies. And it's important to remember that it is a privilege to play Major League Baseball.
Right. It's not a right.
Right. So whether you are convicted or not, you are still putting MLB and their brand in jeopardy, right? You are still doing things that do not help this sport. And I think when you look at the policies that the Players Union and MLB have agreed to, and you look at the way it's set up, MLB has done a really good job. You look at the NFL with Deshaun Watson's at training camp, and people are just kind of ignoring the fact that he's got like 20 women with these complaints against him. You could say a lot about Rob Manfred and MLB and the way these things are handled, but they do seem to be better than other pro sports in recognizing that, listen, the court system has yet to catch up a lot of the times in harassment, child abuse, domestic violence. And so we are going to institute our own policy. We're going to make it tougher. And I think, Dave, in this next CBA, you may start to see language now in contracts that are going to enable teams to cut bait. Because the issue here, and people always want to know, is, well, can't the Dodgers not pay him? Not as it stands right now. And I think that is going to be something that we may see changed by both parties, the union and MLB, in this next round, because the Dodgers have committed $100 million to a guy who may never throw another pitch for them again.
And they could give that money to other players. And the vast majority of players don't want this protection for don't want a guy who's charged with those kind of things to be paid. I mean, that's a case of the union not really representing the rank and file as much as it's representing, the extreme cases. And I agree with you. I think the union would give on that because they know what the rank and file would say. We'd rather give that money to guys who are playing, who aren't acting like idiots, it's interesting because they made it a priority. MLB has over the other leagues, and they really have. This is the one thing, these domestic violence cases, where they have been pretty consistent in handing down suspensions. And while the American justice system sucks in that if you're a multimillionaire, you have a leg up on the average Joe in winning these things because you can just keep throwing more money at it and find any loophole. You could spend millions of dollars like Trevor Bauer can to win, where they're not going to prosecute the thing if it costs them millions to prosecute it, and they might not win it. That is the county, the LA. Like you said, they're not going to prosecute unless it's winnable. And if you're facing a multimillionaire who can have the best attorney and pay him gives him a leg up, but that doesn't affect MLB though, because they're not taking him to court. They're not worried about how much money he can throw at it. They don't care if he's the highest paid player in the game, which he is right now.
Right. And what's interesting to me is, do you remember a few years ago around the All-Star game when some of the homophobic slurs by players came out? Josh
Yeah.
Hader, Trey
Right.
Turner, who's with the Nationals now out in LA, was one.
Sean Newcomb here.
Right. Well, so after that happened, MLB got a third party to help clubs mine for this kind of data among their players. So players who are drafted now, minor league players, at first they had to sign a consent form for this, but now it's worked into their contract. So they know and will be punished when there's things on their social media. So that's what leads me to believe that the next logical step here, if they can protect themselves from a player having these kinds of awful tweets, I think what they're going to maybe move toward next is protect themselves towards something like this. A guy's got skeletons in his closet. A guy has to deal with multiple restraining orders, things like that. I think teams are going to be better equipped, I guess, moving forward, because for a while it was just turn a blind eye, cover it up. And I think now we're moving toward the era where it's like, well, no, like, you want to play baseball, you need to also be a law abiding citizen, right? You need to also be a better person. Again, it goes back to the privilege here. What would the Athletic think if they found a whole bunch of restraining orders on you or me, or, a whole bunch of homophobic tweets? Yeah, you'd be gone. And so I think Major League Baseball is starting to recognize that and recognize the importance of the brand.
Yeah. Yeah. And people that ask, as soon as Ozuna got arrested, people ask, well, can the Braves void the contract? Well, no, they can't, because of the CBA and the way it's written now. It would be, you would think there'd be a morality clause where they would go, okay, he got arrested for domestic violence, the contract is voided, but that's not the case. It's so hard for a team. Really, basically, the only way they could get out of paying him the contract is if he has to go to jail and he's unavailable to play. And that's how they could get out of the contract.
Right.
He's unavailable to play.
Yes. And I also think, as a sidebar here, is that maybe if they do have that clause with voiding, maybe it does prevent some domestic violence.
Yeah.
Maybe in the heat of the moment, it does go through the back of that player's
tens
head
millions
a
of
little
dollars
bit.
on this would cost me to push this woman against this wall. Maybe I should not do this.
Exactly.
You would hope it would, but of course, a lot of times these are fueled by drunken rages. And anyway, that's interesting. It's good. Everybody's following this thing, but yeah, Trevor Bauer is a perfect shitstorm. This guy's just ruined his career. I mean, he had the spin rate thing. His performance was already seemed to be in decline this year. After that, he's a guy that's trashed so many teams, potential employers, teams that might be willing to take a guy with this black mark on him. He's trashed half of them. And the Dodgers players have come out and said, even if they don't put their names on it, they don't want him back. It's just pretty clear they don't want him back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting scenario, and it'll be fascinating to see how long his punishment is. And then also, as you pointed out, like the aftermath of all of this. Does he get signed immediately? Does he have to go pitch somewhere else? Does somebody take a chance on him? Or is he just blackballed forever? I don't know if anyone has the answer to that, but I do think there are teammates and are guys who maybe would look the other way at some transgressions, domestic violence, and some of these other things, who might not be so willing to look the other way on this, because it was very public, very disturbing, and again, was never denied. The acts were never denied. It was a case of consent and whether or not this woman needed protection for life against him. So, as you said, it really is this perfect storm. And it's, to me, an interesting spot for Rob Manfred to be in, to send a message one way or the other about MLB and what they're going to accept and not tolerate going forward.
Yeah, this would be the guy that he could send that message with without really ruffling the feathers of many people, And that's Trevor Bauer. I mean, he's put himself in this position too by being a guy that's disliked so much and being so outspoken about so many things, ripping other guys for so many things. And then here he's got this going on for months and months, apparently. And while he's talking about other people doing relatively, benign things on and off the field, and he's doing what he's allegedly doing behind closed doors. My God, man, that takes some balls to do that, what he was doing. I mean, this guy. Anyway, okay, let's move on. Last night, Braves Yankees meet last night. You know what I was shocked to find out? It was the first time since 1901 that two teams with 9 or more game winning streaks met. I would have thought that had happened, but it had not happened in 120 years.
Yeah.
With,
yeah. And you know what
3
happened
times in history.
Really? Those teams, the last time they met, they split the series. So will the Braves win tonight? And will they repeat history?
They got a pretty good chance because they're facing a lefty. They had won 10 straight games against lefties, by the way, till last night. They're facing a lefty tonight with a 5.5 ERA. So they're a lot better chance. They got Charlie Morton pitching. So there's a good chance they get a split in this thing. So
they also have their whole bullpen, right? Because last night it seemed like Snicker kind of saved all his guys.
Yeah, he didn't use his big guns last night.
So they should, theoretically, they should be more aggressive if Morton struggles early, I would think, right?
And they've got 2 days off. They've got this unprecedented 2 days off. So I think he'll empty the pen if Morton struggles early. Although Charlie's a guy that all season we've seen him, he'll give up 2 runs in the first inning, and then he won't give up anything for the next 6. That's just what he does. So, he'll be a little different than he would with some others. So you would just get him out of there and use the whole bullpen because there's no reason not to use the whole pen with 2 days off. I couldn't believe when I first saw the schedule last year. I've been doing this a long time. I have never seen that before. And not only that, everybody I talked to, nobody has seen it before. Snicker hadn't seen it. Chip Carey, I talked to him. Players, of course, haven't seen it. I've never even heard of it. And it came about because the Yankees they wanted to play a day. If they played Wednesday, they wanted it to be a day game. Braves did not want to play a day game but it would have had to be because they're flying west. I think the Yankees are. Anyway, the Yankees would have preferred to play Monday rather than Wednesday and then have off, right? The Braves were good either way because they hate playing day games here. It's so hard because of the parking situation around there. They use offices and stuff. And so they just like to avoid day games if they can. Plus they sell tons more tickets for night games with the Yankees in town. They're going to have a sold out crowd. So that's how it worked. And, the Yankees requested it back when the schedules were being formulated, and the Braves were like, we're good with that. That's fine. We'll do it Monday instead of playing Tuesday, Wednesday, have an off day in front and back. So as a result, we got 2 off days in the middle of a season, which is just bizarre, man. But
yeah, it
is. It's weird. But anyway, so yeah, that I would think that they can and will use anybody they need to tonight. But the Braves have got. This has been these two teams are so similar in that so many people had written both of them off 3-4 weeks ago. Yankees were in such a tough division and were showing no signs of being able to catch Red Sox, Rays, and then they just got hot at about the same time the Braves got hot. And the Braves were in a division that was eminently winnable because the Mets, they had every chance to put distance between themselves and the Phillies and the Braves, and they didn't. And then they started getting injuries and they lost DeGrom. And so now, the Braves just kept around playing 500 ball, just kept treading water. And then they caught fire and they made those trades at the deadline, which a lot of people ripped Alex at the deadline for why'd you go get 3 outfielders and 1 reliever? Why didn't you go get more arms? And we didn't need 3 outfielders and all this stuff. The trades have worked out great for them. And they have been a different team. They caught fire and they made the most out of playing a really soft part of the schedule. They cleaned up on that 9-game road trip against the Nationals, who are a shell of what they were, the Orioles, who are one of the worst teams I've ever seen, and they swept the Marlins, which is normally a tough place for them to play. But the Marlins are kind of in white flag mode too. They traded away a lot of their pieces, including Duvall, to the Braves, who helped them beat the Marlins the way he helped the Marlins beat the Braves while he was there.
Right.
So there we are. But there's your 2 teams there you covered. The Orioles and the Nationals. I don't know which one's worse right now. Well, I know which one's worse. The Orioles are worse, but the Nats are pretty bad.
The Nats are pretty bad. And count me among the people who wrote off the Yankees because I just thought there was no catching the Rays and the Red Sox. And it's been made possible by the Red Sox here having a slide at the same time the Yankees are hitting that crescendo. I never gave up on the Braves, though, because the NL East was so winnable and because the Mets they just never looked like this runaway team. As soon as DeGrom was out for the season, you were like, oh boy, that's it, right? Like the Mets just kept that. They are the only team, I think, in MLB that less than 20% of their games have they had their projected starting lineup. Just been totally decimated by injuries. just have had a lot of guys totally underperform. I think they
Yeah.
keep waiting on that offense to
Lindor.
click. Yeah, Lindor, Javi Baez, who is back now. Michael Conforto's had a terrible year for them.
Yeah.
Dominic Smith, really the only guy who was hitting consistently has been Brandon Nimmo. And so I think when you look,
McNeil.
right, when you look at these teams, you look at the Phillies and the Braves hanging around.
Yeah.
To me, it's going to come down to like schedule now. The Braves did what they were supposed to do. They did what the Padres couldn't do, which
Right.
essentially the Padres had an easy 2-week stretch, couldn't beat any of those teams. Now they may find themselves out of the playoffs. The Braves took care of business, and now they have a tough part of their schedule coming up. So now they've got a little confidence. They're playing well. The key is going to be, can they take that momentum, right?
Yeah.
As you know, it's a momentum game.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, this Yankees Braves teams was a slot fest, right? It's a game I don't tune in for, instead of last night, like watching and kind of feeling that playoff-esque atmosphere a little bit. So can they, do you think, take this and run with it here, because their schedule gets a lot harder here now?
Oh my God, they went from the softest part to by far the toughest part. And I've also, another thing I've never seen on the schedule is 3 West Coast trips in the last 5 weeks of the season. That's unheard of. You know, the Braves usually play those teams early or in the middle, maybe one at the end, but they've got Padres, Dodgers, Giants, all in the last 5 weeks out there, all in the last 5 weeks of the season, plus the Giants here later this week. So, and Colorado is bad. You know, as mediocre a team as they are, they're still good at home. So that's not a gimme at all. Mm-hmm. You talked about the Phillies. They have the softest schedule in the league the rest of the way in baseball. But what happened? They go out to Arizona and get swept by the D-backs. So it's not like you still got to win those games, you know, and the Braves did that. You know, it would have been like the Braves going into Baltimore and losing 2 out of 3. That would have been the equivalent of, you know, the Phillies getting swept out in Arizona. So, but I agree with you. Watching the Mets play the Braves all year, I never watched the Mets and went, oh, they're going to be tough to catch. And the Braves were the same way. They saw them and go, we can catch these. All we have to do is get hot. We can win this division. And that's why, to a man, they never panicked and they never said anything like, oh, it's going to be tough. They were never worried. I mean, they were worried in the sense that they had not gotten on one of those runs, but they knew they could do it at any time. And then once they made those trades, it seemed to like kind of wake them up a little bit. And you know, and a couple of guys got hot, like Dansby Swanson and Riley are playing the best baseball of their lives. Swanson has gone from a guy in the first half you were like, he's just not as good as we thought he was going to be, to exceeding those expectations. Right now, he's been phenomenal. He's got like 10 homers since the break.
Yeah. Those 2 guys could definitely get MVP votes.
Riley's going to get them.
You look at the Braves and you're like, okay, how are they able to do this, right? Without Acuna and just with, you know, some of the issues that they've had, some of the injuries that they've had, obviously losing Soroka, you know, some of for another year. And they've really been able to sustain this because, like you said, Dansby Swanson, who I didn't realize until I was watching the game last night, just where he's at right now in terms of shortstops in the league and what he's been able to do. He's always been good defensively, but the power is kind of what's setting him apart.
It's deceptive. You look at him, you're like, how's he doing that? Opposite field too. Yeah.
Right. Him and Riley are really kind of that force that's driving this Braves team forward. And, you know, the Phillies, to me, it all rests on Aaron Nola, because every year in September, Aaron Nola really struggles and can't get it done. And we know Wheeler's had a great year. You know, he's a guy who's going to get some Cy Young votes, certainly, especially with DeGrom being out. But you look at it and you're like, okay, if Nola is pitching well, the Phillies are dangerous. This is going to come down to the wire. But if he can't figure it out here, I think that the stage is set, and it's the Braves division to lose here, which is crazy. Even a month ago, if we were talking about this, this would be their 4th title in a row.
Yeah.
When you look at where they started and where they're at, and I think, as you said, Anthopoulos making those moves at the deadline, it would have been really easy to stand pat. To do nothing and say, well, we don't really know if we're going to be good or not. I wonder how much that like mentally helped this team, being like, you know what? We're going for it. Let's just do it.
To his credit, he looked at the competition more so than what the Braves were and said, you know, there's no reason why we can't win this division. Let's go for it. And he had, you know, he has seen it time and time again working in Toronto, what happened when he made trades at the day, what it did for teams, what it meant for teams. And on the other hand, what it said to your team if you didn't make moves, if you said, you know, it's up to you, you know, nothing saps a team more than that, you know, than you're having no confidence from your front office when the division race is out there to win, you know. And a lot of fans would have said, even if the division is winnable, they can't win a World Series, so let's just be sellers. But that wouldn't have made any business sense for the Braves. They're getting great walk-up crowds. They're filling the Battery next door, the retail and the bars and restaurants, which they get a big piece of. So if you wave the white flag at the trade deadline, that's all going to dry up a lot. You're not going to get those walk-up crowds and the excitement and all that. So it made good business sense for them to do this too. But the division was just eminently winnable. And anybody who's been around baseball a long time knows the playoffs are, I know it's a cliche, but they're a crapshoot.
Totally.
It's up to your starting pitcher. And if the Braves have got Charlie Morton, who's been the best starting pitcher in the postseason for the past 5 or 6 years, the best, if you look at his numbers, you got him, you got Max Fried, who on any given night can be one of the best 5 or 6 pitchers in the league easily. And they got Ian Anderson, who at time, not to mention Huascar Noah, who looked great since So they've got the pitching. And with the bullpen added Rich Rodriguez, all of a sudden, and Tyler Matzek's pitching like lights out. He's been phenomenal, for the last 30, 32 appearances. So they've got the pieces now with Austin Riley having picked up so much of the slack from Acuna gone. I mean, he's not Acuna, obviously, but the numbers, if you look at the numbers that Austin Riley, like you said, he's going to get MVP votes. His numbers are really close to Freddie's as far as OPS, slugging, even his OBP, which I would have never thought, and his average, he's hitting almost 300, which this is a guy that could not hit a slider a couple of years ago. He's just defenseless against it. So those guys, Dansby and Ozzie Albies, who quietly, once again, he gets overshadowed, but the guy putting up numbers again. They're going to have 4 guys with 25 homers when Ozzie hits a couple more homers. They'll have 4 guys with 25 and could end up the season. When you include Duvall, they could end up the season with like 4 guys with 30 homers easily.
Yeah. And you're right. Once you get to the postseason, I mean, I covered a Nationals team that won a wild card game because the ball went through someone's legs and they parlayed that into a World Series title. They had like 5 pitchers they trusted. It wouldn't surprise me if the Braves did something like took Yanoa and had him piggyback on someone, right? And had him be that guy who pitches, every other day as like the long man. You've got those 3 starters who get you at least 4 or 5 innings in the playoffs. You've got this good bullpen now, and you've got an offense that seems to be clicking. So to me, it's literally anyone's title. Once you get into the playoffs, it's whoever's the hottest team, as we've seen before. That's all it takes. So I think if you think you're a playoff team and you think you can get there, you don't worry about whether the team is built for the World Series or not. Right. Because so many times the actual best team on paper doesn't win the World Series.
The hottest team. It's the team that goes in with the momentum and makes. We've seen how many wildcard teams have won the World Series now? Like 3. I mean,
easily. Yeah. There's been a lot of
Marlins
teams.
did it twice.
Yeah,
they did it
Marlins
twice.
Have done it. The Cardinals, I think, have done it as a wild card team.
Yeah, the Cardinals did it. They won less than 90 games the year they won the World Series. Mm-hmm. So I mean, we see it again and again. It's not like one case of it, being an anomaly. It happens. So I think the Dodgers still are the favorites after the Scherzer Trey Turner trades. I think before you add Scherzer, maybe they look they could be beaten, and they're not even leading their division, but I still think they're the favorites just because adding Scherzer gives them such a great rotation for the postseason. But that's not to say they can't be beat, because they can for sure. The Giants, I mean, the Giants got to feel good about beating them. They've done it enough times now that the Giants, people, I don't think the vast majority of fans are still sold on the Giants, even though they have the best record in baseball, because they're kind of playing, they're not on TV every night like the Dodgers and the Padres, because they don't have the sexy players, like Tatis and people like that, but they're just doing their thing, and the pieces fit together so well. And, Posey's just been so huge having this resurgence in his career when everybody had written him off and figured he was on the downside of his career. He's just been so big for them, and guys like Gosman pitching so well. They've just that Crawford, all these guys are just, the pieces just fit together really well.
They really are. They're like a band of misfits of it, but the front office has really looked at it as like, how do we get just a little bit better, right? A game of inches the whole way through. Yeah. And they loaded up their coaching staff, and they kind of got all these guys, and they're like, okay, how do we make these guys just a little bit better? And Crawford was so great at the All-Star game and explaining that like the Giants like retooling his swing, and they have all these reclamation projects, and they staff them with the right people, and they've been able to get the most out of these guys. And Gossman's a great example. Here's a guy who really has reinvented himself. His stuff isn't as good as it was years ago in Baltimore, but he's pitching better. He's learning to be a pitcher. And to me, they're just a really interesting team. And as you mentioned, they just beat the Dodgers, I think, last night again. They've beat them all year, and there's something to be said for knowing you can beat a team when you get into the postseason, I think.
And that team knows you can beat them,
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's not a coincidence, the front offices, when you look at those guys that work together and how they approach this thing. They stress, like Alex learned so much working in LA with those guys, and they stress the same things: depth, versatility, but they think as much about the players, the 20 through 26, as they do the top end of the thing. Because you got to have the stars, yeah, but they make sure that they have depth where they're never caught with their pants down. They're never caught with a AAA catcher in there, if they can help it, in a key role, or bringing up a guy and putting in the outfield who was like, I hope he's ready. Instead, they go out and he trades for 3 outfielders he brings in Soler, who had 46 homers a couple of years ago and has been great with the Braves. Duvall comes back in, has been great with the Braves, handles left field. You don't have to worry about that every night. Adds Jock Peterson, who people forget has been never not been to the postseason, has been a terrific postseason hitter. He brings him in, lets him initially hit against lefties. Now they're kind of platoon him with a Heredia, another misfit who is a good platoon guy. So it's just that they're doing the kind of the Dodger way of having this depth and all these pieces, and not having a couple of guys who are just not fit for the major leagues. You use them in the right spots. So the front offices that came out of that LA think tank, and now running the Giants. And then you look at what the Rays do. It's not, I mean, if the Rays don't have him as a GM, they're not doing what they do every year. I mean, they continue to do it year after year after year with the budget they have in that division. And they do it their way, but they stress depth and having all the pieces. And, it's just, you can't just throw money at it and expect to win. Now, the Yankees do it because they have so much money, but most teams can't do that.
That's true.
You got to be smart doing it.
And the Yankees do have some depth here. If you look at it, they've got sneaky depth. They're not just that big market team. They've got a good farm system. They made some really good. We talked about the Braves trade deadline moves. The Yankees made some great.
Really, they did.
Joey Gallo and Anthony Rizzo, really seemed
those
to
guys
prop that team up.
Yeah, Gallo made a catch last night that probably saves the game at the time when it was still winnable. And the Dodgers, obviously, they not only have the money, but they do everything right. They do international free agency. They've always been great at it. They had the Dominican Academy and all that before anybody else did. They draft great. They stress having the pieces. They always cover. They always get these pieces. You're like, did they really need that? Well, no, they want that because they don't want to ever be caught with an injury or two ruining them. So they can absorb Trevor Bauer, the Cy Young Award winner, and not even talk about him being. It's like they just move on, So they have the best of all worlds. Obviously, they got the money and they do everything else right too, and they got a great GM too. So, but if you can beat the Dodgers, which the Braves had a chance last year in the NLCS, you're doing something. But the Dodgers are better this year, I think. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting. I think it's wide open. I don't think it's a given of what's going to happen. The AL's wide open for sure. Look at the White Sox.
Yep.
What they're doing for La Russa, man. Everybody just got shits all over La Russa, but look at him. I mean, he gets results.
Yeah, that's a really talented team. That's really talented.
It'd be hard to mess it up. It would have been hard to mess it up. But he's done a good job with them, I think.
He has. And you're right. I mean, the AL, in my opinion, is wide open. The Astros, we kind of forget about, but they're talent because they're not super flashy anymore. They're talent. They're just a talented team, right? They're just a very talented team.
Yeah, they're solid. They don't have any weaknesses.
No, they don't. And they've been good here for a while. They've been just steady pretty much the entire season. So you look at the Rays, as we talked about, really good team. I think Oakland's probably going to come up short. I think the Blue Jays, unfortunately, are probably going to be on the outside looking in, but what a good team to be ultimately probably a 4th place team.
It's sure fun to watch.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be, I love when we get to September, Dave, because that's when all of a sudden every game matters, right?
Yeah.
For the teams that are trying to get to the playoffs, it becomes that extension of October almost, right? Once we get to September, the countdown is on, and it's just my favorite month outside of obviously the playoffs. But it's no longer do you hear guys say, oh, it's early or we have time. No,
it's not the dog days, and it's not. There is urgency for sure. You're not hearing that anymore. There's still a lot of baseball to be played. You don't hear that as much now. It's like every game counts. They're literally saying that every game counts, So, but yeah, I looked at the power rankings that we had in the Athletic yesterday. The new ones, Dodgers, of course, are at the top. Even though the Giants are going, wait a minute, we got the better record. Giants, the only 80-win team in baseball. The Astros are third. The Brewers, man, or the Astros, the Rays are third. The Rays are third. The Brewers, fifth after the Astros. The Brewers are another team that kind of like the Astros. They're not real sexy or anything. They're big three on their starting rotation is so good. Their bullpen is so good. And they got some horses in the lineup too. And I think, in my opinion, they got the best manager in baseball. I think Craig Counsell is incredible.
Yeah, you're right. And they're certainly right up there. And I mean, they're a team that kind of like every year hangs around. And then in September, you look at the Brewers September record and it's pretty crazy. Like they've always been a team that's really thrived there at the end of the season. They've done great with roster expansion. You're right. Counsell does a great job kind of with the roster manipulation. Corbin Burns, I mean, after the start of the season he had to still be pitching like he's pitching, as you mentioned, Brandon Woodruff, like that rotation has just always been there. And now we're seeing the offense. And now you're like, God, this is a really strong team. This isn't the Brewers of years past where they're like fringy, right? This is a team you don't want to play in the postseason, especially in a short series because of that rotation.
Yeah, that's a formidable first three. Any team with a great first three, they got a chance in the postseason. I mean, and on the other hand, if you've only got a couple of starting pitchers, you're vulnerable because that game three, you can't run that game one starter out there in game three. So, you're going to bullpen game it. Not many teams can get away with that other than the Rays.
No, exactly. And the pitching
disrupts
is the reason,
everybody else.
Yeah. The pitching to me is like why the Padres are in this position, right? They fired their pitching coach yesterday.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Hey, that's a big dog.
He usually doesn't move. He must be really fired up about the Padres moves. To me, obviously it's never the pitching coach's fault, right?
No, scapegoat. Larry got scapegoated.
Yeah, totally. No, but when you look at the pitching, like the pitching is the reason the Padres are in trouble now.
Yeah.
It's the reason that they might miss the postseason because Manny Machado is having an MVP year. We know Tatis has been in and out. He's been hurt. But it's the pitching. You look at their rotation, it's in shambles. There's really been no pitcher who has done what they have expected them to do. And this might be the reason they missed the postseason after this spring of like unprecedented expectations, right? We were talking about the rivalry with the Dodgers and the Padres, and neither of those teams may win the division.
Yeah, and we all were like 2 months into the season saying, well, it's a given 3 teams are coming out of the West, so the other divisions, you better win the division or you're not getting in. Yeah. Well, I don't think the Padres are going to get that wildcard spot now. It's going to go to the second place team in the Central or even the East.
Yes. I mean, the Reds all of a sudden have, I like woke up one day and was like, whoa, the Reds are in it. It's remarkable. And obviously watching Joey Votto play like this. You add him to Castellanos
and Winker, you got 3 guys that are like murderer's row now with Votto hitting for power. I mean, those 3 guys, you look at their power numbers, it's like, whoa.
I mean, count me among the people who thought that Votto's best days were behind him.
Oh, absolutely.
I just did not see it. I have no problem admitting that. I didn't think the Yankees were going to make the playoffs a few weeks ago. I didn't think the Reds.
Shocking, Votto.
I didn't think he had this in him. And it's been so fun to watch. He's one of the most fun players in baseball, I think. One of the coolest personalities. And,
he's great. He's really intelligent and witty, and dry sense of humor. But that was like 3 years ago. I'm like, draw another walk, Joey. Jesus. He's like at 450 on base percentage, higher than his slugging percentage, his on base was. I mean, it's a guy that was like, dude, they're not paying you $25 million or whatever to draw, 200 walks and hit 10 home runs. Or whatever he did. It wasn't that low, but I was the same way. I was like, he's on the downside. It's a shame to see. You start to feel sorry for him a couple of years ago. And now he's just raging. It's crazy. And he's changed his swing. It's he's changed his swing, and he's one guy that it's actually working, that he's trying to hit for power and it's working. Not many guys can get away with doing that, but he's a pretty special hitter. But he's a different hitter than he used to be. He's not up there looking for walks now, but he'll take one. But he's doing damage, man.
now I'm like all in on this Reds thing. I'm like, well, now I kind of want to see them get the second wild card. I think it'd be kind of fun. It's
Yeah.
you don't want the Padres to limp in. That's not fun. I want a really good
Yeah, I
wild
don't think
card
the Padres
game.
are going to do it. I think they're going to keep spiraling because they, and Tatis is at any given time could go down again.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll see. What's going to be interesting. All right. Well, I've kept you long enough, and I really appreciate all your insight on this stuff. It was really good, and you know what's going on with that stuff. It's good to. I'm sure the listeners are appreciated too, clarifying some of these things.
Yeah, well, it was great to chat with you. Great to
All
join.
right. Aren't you glad you're not covering the Nats right now?
Oh God, those are always, as you know, as a beat writer, there's nothing worse than a team that doesn't want to win the last like 6 weeks, just like playing out the string.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is just, you
Terrible.
are checking those days off. You are in and out of the stadium as quick as possible. It's.
What am I going to write about today?
Oh God. And the Nats rebuild is still in the infancy. So you're not like, oh, can't wait to watch these young guys. They're not there yet.
Yeah.
Similar to the Orioles. They're not there yet. So fans can't even go and watch a Adley Rushman yet.
Yeah.
You got to just hope. Hope is a dangerous drug, but it's really all you have.
Only thing worse might be covering the Cubs right now. That's another story. Because to me, that is like there's no excuse. The Cubs should never be in this mode, in my opinion. When you've got Wrigley Field, the teller, the ATM that is Wrigley Field and the surrounding Wrigley Field.
Yeah.
I don't care what they say. If they've convinced some of their fans that, they did what they had to do. No, they didn't. No. They should be like the Dodgers and the Yankees. The Cubs should never be down like that. And the Red Sox. Those are teams that have too much money to ever have to go into rebuild mode like that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Make too much money.
I agree.
Too good of fan bases, ballparks, everything else. They should never be in that kind of stripped down mode. But
yeah. Yep, I totally agree. Well, thanks for having
me.
Right. Eric will be back for everyone who can't wait for that. Yeah.
We hope. We never know. He might have another kid. Who knows? All right. That's it. Thanks, Britt. We appreciate it. 755 is real. We're out. Hey, thanks so much.
Yeah, of course.
It's always
always flies by, chat.